why the weeks of sleepless nights and all the hard work of thousands of volunteers across the state. I feel like I'm cutting it out. Am I? Okay.
What we got?
And then I'll answer questions. So I have to look at my own notes, even though I wrote the whole thing. Okay. So, as to...
You might have to stand behind the speakers, I don't know.
Away from it for it to work. Stand up here maybe, I don't know. I think that's still the bigger one.
I can stand on the car.
That's going to be better.
Stand on there? Are you sure it's not going to be too close? How's it now? Okay. So, as to why we're doing this, I don't know about you, but I really don't like when the government tries to tell me what to do. You do like when the government tells you what to do?
No, I didn't know.
Oh.
I was agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. I'm like, you're the one person here that likes when the government knows. So I also, things have been so crazy. Our lives have been turned so upside down so quickly and to such a degree we've never quite seen before. I think this is our one opportunity in probably our whole lives that enough people are awakened to see what's happening that we can actually make a change. So when God said to me one day, you know what, you're going to write a constitutional amendment, and I said, well, obviously I did it, and here we are, because this is the time for his people to stand up and do the right thing and to take back our government. If we don't do it now, it's never going to happen. If enough people are not upset about their preschoolers having to wear masks in the fall at school, or having their businesses shut down for months on end, or oh my gosh, all the insane things that have been happening to us these last few months. If enough people are not upset about that, I really don't know what it would take to get people moving and doing something about it. So a couple of key things that this does, it does so many amazing things, that's why I have to look at my notes. So first of all, it's going to streamline and clarify our courts. Raise your hands if you know the difference between misdemeanors, high court misdemeanors, felonies, when you get bound over from district court to circuit court. Really? Okay, the one. But in all seriousness, is it straightforward? Does that kind of a system allow people, with the fact that all of you basically had your eyes glaze over when I said that, means that our system is broken. If you can't even understand the very basics about the two different main kinds of criminal law and how they're broken up into the different courts, it tells me that our system is broken. It doesn't tell me that you're broken, it tells me that our system is broken. At what point, in what court do you go to for family law stuff? Well, is it a child protection case? Is it a guardianship of a loved one who's an adult? Is it a divorce? Is it child support? There's a wide variety of things. Is it adoption, a step-parent adoption? There's so many different things that can happen, and it's done differently in each county for the most part. So why is that? How is that a system where everybody can really, truly participate in their government? We also have an issue with the separation of powers, right? We have a governor who is currently issuing, well, last I looked, 130 executive orders so far in 2020. In all fairness to her, from what I can tell, 6 of them actually have nothing to do with COVID-19. But 124 out of the 130 do. And that's insane. The thing is, these executive orders at the bottom of each and every one of them, they say that they're enforceable under penalty of law. It's a misdemeanor to violate these executive orders. And so she's treating them with the full force and effect of a law. Well, last I checked, separation of powers required in our state constitution, it's Article 3, Section 2, that the legislative powers, the powers to create laws, change laws, take away the laws, is not in the executive branch, it's in the legislative branch. So that's a problem. Besides which, there's other constitutional provisions that she's violating. I don't know if any of you remember April 30th when we had the first big rally where everybody was out of their cars at the state capitol, and the legislature decided they were going to keep the doors shut so we couldn't get in and see the process in violation of the Constitution. And the House and the Senate, they worked on this Senate Bill 858, and they chopped it up and moved it all around, and they spit it back out and said, okay, we have this solution, and we're so proud of this. And then the governor said, she did a special Thursday press conference that week instead of the usual Monday, Wednesday, Friday coronavirus updates. And she said, well, basically the legislature, they're a bunch of idiots. I can't sign this if I wanted to because it violates, I think it's Article 4, Section 25 of our state constitution that says you can't have a law that covers more than one subject. Well, when you have a law, such as that one, that codified 29 of her executive orders, it pretty much covered every single subject known to man. But guess what? Every single one of her executive orders covers multiple subjects. Like the stay-at-home orders, I'm pretty sure that affects, well, the laws on driving and the laws on, you know, landlord-tenant issues and what you could sell in stores and, you know, all kinds of interesting things. Yet she thinks she's allowed to do that, being the governor, who's not even supposed to write laws in the first place. Also, our Constitution says unless there is a 2/3 vote to put immediate effect to a law, the governor, as the chief executive officer, has to wait 90 days before enforcing that law. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't 90 days in between her issuing the executive orders and then enforcing them. And I'm pretty sure the legislature didn't have a 2/3 vote to give them immediate effect. Anyway, there's quite a few laws like that, or excuse me, constitutional provisions that she is not following. When it comes down to it, I really don't know why, quite frankly, our legislature hasn't stood up and said enough is enough. Even if we assume this was all constitutional up until this point, by April 30th, it was not following the statute at all. So we're done. Everybody, you can just carry about your business. They didn't do that. They told us that we have to follow the governor's executive orders while things get sorted out in court. Well, I'm not very patient, especially not when it comes to my constitutional rights. And that's why we did this. But it's also why I have a brief that was filed with the Michigan Supreme Court in the legislature's case against the governor. And hopefully today, when I get back from here, I will be filing in the Court of Appeals, since we all know that the Supreme Court in Michigan decided they were not going to take the case and they were going to kick it back down to the Court of Appeals. So I will be filing hopefully later today. Same issues. Basically, things that I wouldn't have to write if, when we get our constitutional amendment passed. Points that we don't have to make anymore at that time. So transparency, accountability, accessibility, those are main functions of government, of a kind of government, let's say, I don't know, one that has an Article 4, Section 4 guarantee for a Republican form of government like we do in our US Constitution. In order to have a Republican form of government where the people retain the ultimate sovereignty and we just have people that represent us, they don't take the power from us, they are just essentially borrowing it to represent our interests. In order for that system to work, we have to be able to have accessibility to them. We have to have transparency so we can see what they're doing, see the reasons why they're making those choices, and then there has to be accountability. So if we don't like their choices, if they're not following the laws, they're not following the Constitution, we can hold them accountable. So we have some systems set up for that. We have the Freedom of Information Act, we have the Open Meetings Act, we have a couple of other provisions like that. Clearly, there's enough loopholes in there that they've been able to wiggle all this stuff on through, or if we have an executive order that says you don't have to follow FOIA during COVID-19, I guess that takes care of that, along with the Open Meetings Act. Well, the way that I see it, even when our Freedom of Information Act and our Open Meetings Act are functioning in their fullest capacities, as they should be, as they're written into the statutes, it's not enough. Like I said, the loopholes are there, but then what about the courts? What about the governor's office? What about the fact that she has all this science and data, the best kind, and she's not sharing it with us? I mean, she wants to share her restrictions with us, but not the information that she's placing, those restrictions upon. To me, that's not right. We've been so used to, we've been conditioned for decades, my whole life certainly, that when the government says, you just don't understand. I know what I'm doing, you don't, it's okay, just trust me. We've been conditioned to think that that's okay, and that's the way that it's supposed to work. I grew up thinking that. I quite honestly, going into this, when I was telling the state reps that I knew and state senators that I knew, April 5th, April 6th, don't you dare vote to give her an extension. Clearly they didn't listen. I knew then in general it was wrong, but I honestly didn't even dig into it to question how much of it was wrong. The more I read, the more I look at the actual language of our state constitution and our federal constitution, the more I realize we are so far off base. If we don't do something now, our country is gone. And I'm not usually an extremist kind of person, but that's the truth. So we need to have that transparency, we need to have that accountability, we need to have that accessibility, and it needs to be on the onus of the government to give that information. Why should you have to make a FOIA request for them to deny, and then you have to appeal it in a certain way, and then you have to pay the fee just to get the information that you need from your government to know why they're making their decisions? They work for us. We have to pay them for the information. Do you have to pay your secretary if you work at an office with a secretary? Do you have to pay the secretary to give you the information that you've asked her to compile for you? That doesn't seem right. I mean, you pay her an hourly wage, right? You wouldn't have to pay her for a request and submit all kinds of goofy documentation. That doesn't seem right. This is no different. They work for us. So we should be able to have access to that information without having to pay ridiculous fees, without having a bunch of loopholes they can just jump through to avoid the requests, and without, quite honestly, having to make the requests in the first place. A lot of the information that we need, they should be able to put right on the website, whether it's a local town hall, whether it's the legislature, I don't care. All government, hopefully the wind's not picking up too much in the mic, all government should be able to put that right out there for the people to see. And, when it comes to decisions that are being made, no more of this voice vote garbage. I don't care what level of government you're in or what branch of government you're in. If you're not confident enough to be able to say yes or no on a vote and have your name tied to it, you shouldn't be voting in the first place. So that's in there too. I don't know why I'm pointing over at Audra like you're holding the petition right now, because you're not, but so it is. All kinds of goodies. Let's see, what else did I not mention? Oh, yeah. So a lot of people, so I had a very long conversation with, well, a couple different long conversations with media today. We'll see if it actually makes it into print or, in the press. So far it hasn't. But there is one guy in particular that was questioning me and basically hinting that this is a constitutional revision. So you might hear more and more people talk about that we're not going to be able to get it done this way as a constitutional amendment, which is the whole petition process, and then getting it on the ballot for November 3rd, because it's a constitutional revision. We're doing so many things, we're changing the whole Constitution, that they're going to have to do it as a constitutional convention. And then if you do it that way, it's opening the whole thing up so that everybody can just change what they want, and it's going to be utter chaos. That's garbage. To all those people that are, especially the attorneys, that are arguing that, they should know better and they should learn how to read. So there are, we all know, I'm guessing that if you were in Michigan 2 years ago, you heard about the Voters Not Politicians thing that we all voted on one way or the other 2 years ago. It's the constitutional amendment that added 4,250 words to our state constitution. Mine doesn't do that. So there's a lot of words in what I've printed, but you also have to include what you're taking out in your language, not just what you're putting in. And the language that you're leaving alone, that's also reprinted in there. So the Voters Not Politicians amendment was challenged by, I want to say it's Citizens Protecting Michigan's Constitution or something like that. It's a group that generally challenges any kind of constitutional amendments. And so they challenged it, and in 2018, the Michigan Supreme Court, by the way, the same 4 justices that authored or signed on to the majority opinion then are still on the bench now. So I think it's a pretty good indicator of what would happen in this case. But they basically said that the whole way that they had been doing this in prior decisions with prior courts before was imposing unnecessary additional restrictions upon people when they try to do a constitutional amendment like this. In fact, they said that the highest safeguard in making sure that you don't unnecessarily make changes to your Constitution is the signature requirement. I mean, we have to have 425,059 good signatures, which is why we're shooting for 550,000 signatures to make sure that they're all good and everything's good in the qualified voter database. That's a lot of signatures. And then on top of that, you have the vote. So then at that point, it's going to go to the November vote, and we have to have a simple majority to be able to have this pass. That's no small feat, especially when you're going to have big money on the other side doing ads and all kinds of fun stuff, right? This is going to be a grassroots movement start to finish. So what they said is that is enough of a requirement. We don't need to create these other, hoops for people to jump through. And they explained that just because it might be a longer petition does not mean that that means it's a general revision. So I can bore you with all the other fun legalities that they talked about in there. You can ask me afterwards and I'll tell you all about it. My husband will yawn and wish that he wasn't standing there when we're talking about it. But I at least wanted to tell you that there is the Supreme Court currently that's on the court right now is not going to turn this down as a general revision. I'm sure there's other highlights in there that I should be talking about. Oh, yes, emergencies. That's a big one. Currently, our state and federal constitutions do not allow the government, the governor, the legislature, or any person in government to have additional powers simply because it's a time of emergency, time of war, any of that stuff. But because they were having a little bit of hard time understanding that, I cemented that in like big bold letters right in the first change I did in Article 1, Section 17. Also, here's a big one, I don't know why I didn't start with this. I'm assuming all of you have heard of due process, right? Everybody here knows that we have a constitutional right to due process. You can't be denied of your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. But raise your hand if you can, fairly quickly tell us exactly what that means. Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be able to figure out how to very quickly tell you that because, quite honestly, it doesn't apply equally in every situation. But why not? Why do we know, at least from the 90s with O.J. Simpson, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit or whatever, right? You have that high, beyond a reasonable doubt standard. I mean, that's where I basically learned it. I don't know about you, but that's the case that cemented that theory in my head. So why is it, though, that it's in criminal cases that we have that standard? Why would it be any different in a child protection case where they want to take your children because you don't want to give them a COVID-19 vaccine? I'm talking in the future, obviously, or am I? I think it's Colorado and a couple of other states that I've seen their actual DHS forms, and well over a month ago it became a standard, a checkbox to mark on a form if they were going to remove a child simply because a parent tested positive for COVID-19. It's basically like saying you have the flu, so you can't parent and we're going to take your kid from you. Anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole. point being, why would it just be our criminal cases where we have that due process protection, where they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you have done X, Y, Z? It shouldn't be that way. So if they want to take your life, your liberty, or your property, the government should have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that doing so is necessary because you are taking away somebody else's life, liberty, or property. If they can't prove that, then what the heck are they doing in the first place? I mean, the Declaration of Independence says the whole reason why we create governments is to secure the blessings of liberty that God gave us. So if they're not securing our blessings of liberty, they shouldn't be doing a darn thing. So that's the spirit of that, is what all of these minute detail changes are doing. They're stripping away things like unelected officials making decisions that affect us, or administrative rules and regulations being imposed upon us as people. Why should administrative rules have any bearing on us when the people making those we didn't vote them into office? What about our laws that are currently written? How many of you think that our legislators write the laws? I did. I thought our legislators really wrote the laws. They don't. Legislative council, attorneys that are overpaid and who are not elected, write the laws for our legislators. They literally, according to the Constitution as it currently exists, they do the research, which I thought was the whole point of a legislator talking with constituents, but anyway. They draft the laws, and then they give them advice and tell them on what the law says and how to vote on it. Really? If you can't write it and read it yourself, why would you be in a position to vote on it to take away our freedom? To me, that just doesn't make sense. So, it should not be a government of attorneys. I mean, I worked hard for my law degree. I was a single mom going to law school, and I wouldn't take it back. But that doesn't mean that every single person standing here should have to be an attorney to figure out how to read the laws. If they're overly complicated, they need to be not on the books. That's the way I see it. You can't have a government by the people if people can't even read the laws. And again, I don't blame the people. I blame the people that wrote them. So, at any rate, that is much more of a summary than what I anticipated on giving you, but I would definitely like to answer some questions, comments, or concerns, and it doesn't matter if you're here because you already support what we're doing or because you don't. As my husband can attest to, I've definitely been at rallies over this last weekend where we had some protesters, and I'll answer and address those as well. I have nothing to hide, so please don't be shy. Any comments or questions would be greatly appreciated. Yeah?
Are you going to eventually run for president?
If God's going to punish me that way, I guess I'll do what he says. I would love to be on a beach in Florida right now with my, the sand between my toes, which I guess being president I could. My dad seems to think I should be governor. Well, and so does my 6-year-old.
I mean, I'd vote for you.
Thank you. Again, if God wants to punish me by doing that, I will follow what he wants me to do. Until then, you can always make me a write-in candidate, I guess, right? The next election, and if I win, then I win, and I guess I'll know that's, where I gotta be. But yet we kept yard signs from when I ran for state rep in 2015, 2016, just because they're expensive, but I'm pretty sure it's not enough coverage for 83 counties across the state of Michigan. Speaking of 83 counties, though, although if any of you have seen my recent videos, we're not going to be talking about the numbers that we have right now. Our focus on these next 7-8 days is going to be getting as many signatures as humanly possible and verifying those signatures with the qualified voter database to make sure that they are good and legit and everything's great with them. And then once we've gotten to that point, we'll announce, okay, yep, we have them all turned in, this is how many we have. I mean, I'm not going to hide that, but this time frame is so short and so focused that we have to be focused on what the end goal is, which is to get this done. However, what I can tell you is that we have over 1,500 volunteers all across the state, and we have over, I should have checked the final numbers today. I want to say it's 475 signing locations that are stationary signing locations, either at people's homes or businesses that they've signed up all across the state. We've had literally hundreds of events. We have as many as 75 events in any given day advertised on our website, signing events, big and small. And we have our numbers guy, I'm going to look at him. You haven't seen if we had any of those other counties come in, have you? Okay, so we've had at least another 20,000 petitions come in since the last time he gave me numbers. But the last time he gave me numbers, we have signatures in 79 of the 83 counties in Michigan. So I don't think we're doing too shabby. I think we're doing just fine. So anyway, yeah, so I was answering questions. Are there any other questions? There's got to be other questions. Yeah?
Is this a constitutional amendment? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay. How is this going to address specifically the separation of powers between the legislature, the courts, and the governor, especially the governor, any governor, no matter if he's male or female? How is that going to address that? And possibly, because I think everybody here probably agrees that needs to be addressed. Right now, the governor has way too much power, and for whatever reason, our legislatures decided that they're not going to do anything about it. So, number one, I think what needs to be done is we need to address that. Those powers of the governor need to be addressed, and some of them need to be changed. And then our legislature needs to be held accountable for what they do or what they don't do. And then our courts also have to understand they are not legislatures. They don't make laws. They interpret them. We see that on the state and the federal level all the time. And that needs to be addressed and needs to be resolved also.
So the short answer is the constitutional amendment does actually address all of those pieces. The little bit longer answer is that our state constitution is actually not too shabby on them the way it's currently written. What people are forgetting, or what the main problem is that every single judge, every single attorney in the state of Michigan, every single police officer, legislator, governor, school board member, I mean every single person who's a public official in Michigan takes an oath under Article 11, Section 1 of the state constitution, and that oath specifically says you're going to do two things. You're going to support the U.S. Constitution and you're going to support the Michigan Constitution, period. It does not say you're going to support all of the laws of the state of Michigan or of the U.S., because guess what? Sometimes we have laws that are unconstitutional and they can't be enforced. So what we are forgetting is that we have an oath, and whether we like it or not, whether we agree with the particular politics of what's happening or not, if we're part of the system and we're not doing what we can, anything within our power to uphold that U.S. and Michigan Constitution, we're violating that oath. And every single person should be held accountable. Every single law enforcement officer who's trying to enforce the illegal executive orders. Every single judge who's participating in that way, obviously the governor and the attorney general, and I could go on and on. I wrote a letter to every single prosecuting attorney, city attorney, sheriff's office, and police department all across the state of Michigan 2 months ago, Mike? Anyway, no, it was the beginning of May, after the attorney general wrote her letter to all of them saying, oh, yeah, we have to, we have to enforce these executive orders. They're totally perfect and fine, and here's why you have to do it. She forgot to really reference anything in the Constitution, but I wrote them all. Not because I was getting paid, because I didn't get paid. I don't get paid for this. I mean, people have started to make donations, which is greatly appreciated, but this is not something I'm definitely getting rich off of in any way, shape, or form. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do and because I took an oath. And I expect more people that took this oath to stand up and start speaking out. And hopefully, going around to rallies all across the state like we've been doing is going to help encourage other people who took the oath to stand up and do the right thing. But the separation of powers, it's interesting because our state constitution, and our U.S. Constitution, but our state constitution actually does a good job the way that it is on that point. I do make some fine-tune adjustments there for clarification. But the brief, if I don't know if you were standing there when I mentioned earlier about writing a brief, the brief that I wrote at the Michigan Supreme Court in the legislature's case with the governor, it went over that very point. A point that neither the legislature nor the governor's attorney seems to really understand. The legislature makes the argument that it's unconstitutional for the governor to take the legislature's powers because of the separation of powers, but then they kind of leave it at that, and then they forget about all the other things that are unconstitutional about doing any of this stuff to us. But our Constitution does not allow, I mean, it specifically says you cannot exercise, if you are in the executive branch, you cannot exercise the powers properly belonging to the legislative or judicial branches, or vice versa, okay? So it's just points of clarification that are made in there. And specifically, your point of interpretation from the courts, I actually put a lot of things in the constitutional amendment, but also in the brief that I filed with the Supreme Court on that very issue, because it's, in fact, the case I mentioned earlier that happened in 2018 with the Voters Not Politicians, that was a beautiful case. You should read it. It was awesome because it talks about the fact that they're not even supposed to interpret if there's no interpretation really needed. The whole point, if you go to the text of the Constitution itself or the law, depending on what the situation is, and the text itself is exceedingly clear, you're not supposed to go and look at all these extra sources and figure out what everybody's intentions were. You look at the document itself and you go, oh, well, it says the sky is blue, so the sky is blue. We're not going to research and figure out what they were thinking at that time. And so it's that kind of thought process. In fact, some of the very language from that court decision went into the petition to make it exceedingly clear what we expect when it comes to interpreting the laws and what that really is supposed to look like. And the really obvious basic ideas, like, you know, this concept of in para materia, right? If you have, the legislature has talked about, and, you know, a lot of people are talking about, I honestly, even though I'm a lawyer, didn't even necessarily recognize what that meant until a couple of months ago when I started writing these briefs. But if you have two laws that are on the same subject, you know, I use the example of the speed limits and the seatbelts, and you have your driver's license, and you're going to go and get in your car, do you get to pick, well, I think I'm going to follow the speed limit today, but I'm going to totally ignore that seatbelt law, and if I get a ticket for that, yeah, I'll just tell them no, they don't have a right to do that because I'm choosing to follow the speed limit laws today. That's not how it works. You have to follow the laws on the same topic. And so something like that, which is so obvious to me, something that seems so common sense, I put that kind of clarification right in the constitutional amendment as well. So I'm trying to remember, I think you had a third piece to your question, but did I answer your...
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. So for anybody who didn't hear, the question is this petition more important, or what are the differences between this petition, the constitutional amendment petition, and the recall Whitmer petitions? In a sense, they're two totally different things. So some people want to recall the governor because they just want her out because she needs to be punished, she shouldn't be able to keep doing what she's doing, etc. And it's a focus on her and making sure she knows better, or that she can't continue to benefit in any way from being governor. If that's what you're going for, then the recall effort that's what it does, and that's what it will do. My petition doesn't do that. If you're more concerned to make sure this doesn't ever happen again, and that we can stop it as soon as possible, so that you know, we don't have the craziness about when kids are going back to school, or, you know, all these other things that are going to be happening. You know, when flu season comes back and Governor Whitmer decides that she wants to reinstitute all these, you know, ridiculous restrictions upon us, that's a different story. A recall is only, the recall petition for governor is different than any other recall. So Article 5, Section 26 of our state constitution says that when you recall the governor, or when she's convicted after an impeachment, or if she resigns, or she dies, if governor is removed from office for any reason in Michigan, the attorney general, or excuse me, the lieutenant governor is the one that takes that place. So that would be Gilchrist. I don't know about you, but I don't have a whole lot of faith that he's going to do any better than she is. If he somehow gets recalled or steps down or whatever, it goes to the Secretary of State. I don't know about you, but with her sending out all the absentee ballots and all kinds of other garbage that's going on, I don't trust her to run our state either. And if she gets somehow recalled for what she's been doing, then it goes to the Attorney General. I really don't trust Dana Nessel to run our state. In fact, Dana Nessel, if you're watching, I still want to debate you on the steps of the Capitol, so please consider taking me up on that. Then our Constitution says, well, if none of those four are in place, then the state statutes take over, and Mike Shirkey, who is our Senate Majority Leader, would be governor. And if he's not available for whatever reason, then it would be Lee Chatfield, who is our Speaker of the House. I don't care R or D behind your name. None of them have done a good job in representing us and taking care of us and following the Constitution, so none of them deserve to be governor or running our state. So it would have to be 6 recalls happening for me to really get behind and get all excited about it. But besides that, that's only going to be a here and now thing. So assuming we have 6 recall petitions done all at once and it works, what happens when the people that replace them are just as bad? Constitutional amendment is going to change the way that it happens. It's going to spell out things that our founders never would have even thought in a million years we would have to spell out. It's stuff that they'd be like, are you serious? This is just how it's supposed to be. So we're spelling it all out. We're making it clear. And we're taking away, we're cutting all the fat, if you will. It's not just, I'll talk about, the 1945 Act, that Stand Up Michigan is supporting, and our legislature is supposedly, officially supporting. That's fine, but the 1945 Emergency Powers of Governor Act is not the only problem. We have a 1976 Emergency Management Act that has a lot more horrible stuff in it that the governor hasn't even attempted to use yet. We have statutes in our public health code that allowed a judge in Kent County to go and issue warrants for a bunch of people that he didn't even know existed yet, because somebody from the health department went and said, hey, can you give me a bunch of warrants, because if I think somebody has COVID, I want to be able to arrest them, take them into custody, lock them up, test them, and treat them as we see fit. And the judge issued those warrants. I don't know about you, but that's a problem. And that should never happen in the United States of America. So that has nothing to do with the executive orders, if you can believe it or not. That's done under public health code. So where's the repeal of that? Or one of 47 other things that are wrong with any other statute you can just open the book to and just point your finger on, and I guarantee you it's going to be something that's messed up. So any laws that are going to restrict our freedoms, I don't see why it couldn't be done by a supermajority, a 2/3 vote. I mean, if it's worth it, if the people truly think this is what's necessary to keep us safe or do whatever, then a 2/3 vote should be no problem. Party lines should no longer matter. It shouldn't be about Republicans and Democrats. It should be about what's best for the people of Michigan. So this constitutional amendment does just that. So hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions or comments, concerns? This is the first time this has happened at a rally. No other comments or questions? Nothing?
Do you expect the state to fight you once they send these petitions in?
Absolutely, 100%. I expect everything to be a fight start to finish. That's why leadership told state reps and senators and everybody else they're not allowed to come to any of our freedom rallies here. They're allowed to go to the Stand Up Michigan rallies, but they're not allowed to come to our freedom rallies. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I expect it to be a fight start to finish, absolutely. I think it's going to be a fight in the court system at that point. It's probably going to be that same organization, the Citizens Protecting Michigan's Constitution. It's going to be, shoot, I probably have all the branches of government after me, quite frankly, because I'm taking away power that doesn't belong to them in the first place and returning it back to the people. So I can't imagine that Republicans, Democrats, judges, lawyers, anybody who profits off of the system the way that it is right now, they're not going to be happy about it, and they're going to do everything they can to stop it. So, yes, I will have a lot of sleepless nights. It'll be great. Right, hon? Oh, my husband's so excited, smiling over there. Any other questions? None? Really? Yes.
I guess I do. It's kind of a sticky question because I never thought about them being told they cannot come to a rally when it's a free country, supposedly free country. How can they keep them from coming and intermingling with all of us?
Well, the punishment, you see, isn't any kind of criminal punishment or removing them from office. The punishment is something like, oh, you wanted to be on that particular committee? Well, you're not going to chair that committee if you're going to do what I don't want you to do. Or, oh, you think the Republican Party is going to be behind you in your race, when you're being challenged in your primary or in your general election? Guess what? We're not going to do that either. I don't know if any of you have heard of State Rep Karen Whitsett out of Detroit. She's a Democrat who got COVID-19. She and her husband were near death and wanted the hydroxychloroquine that President Trump had been talking about. And she asked for it, and the original doctors she had would not give it to her. And they said, well, the government won't let us here in Michigan. They're telling us we can't prescribe it for this purpose. Well, she had a bipartisan effort. Annette Glenn, state rep around the Midland area, and a few other senators and representatives joined in the effort to write letters and basically say, no, you're looking at this wrong. You can write her this prescription, save her life, my goodness. At any rate, she finally got it. She recovered, and she went to thank President Trump at the White House, and the Michigan Democratic Party basically told her, you're done. You're not allowed to participate in our caucus activities anymore. We're not going to help you in elections. You're booted out. So I called her up and I said, Karen, I'm not a Democrat, but I'll door knock for you in downtown Detroit any day of the week. You tell me when and where, give me your door knocking list, and I'll go with you, because any person who's going to stand for what's right against party lines, that's a good person in my book. Now, I'd like to say that there's a lot of people that I know in the House and in the Senate right now that would do that on either side of the aisle, and I know quite a few of them. I mean, I ran for state rep not that long ago, and I still have a lot of people I'd consider friends. With what I've seen and heard from them, the angry phone calls I've gotten about this petition and how I should just be supporting the 1945 repeal, by the way, long before they ever announced that's what they were going to do. How dare you, Catherine? How dare you? You're going to disenfranchise the voters. Me? I'm just an attorney. I'm just a citizen taking my own, constitutional right to have a citizen's petition. I'm not sure what this has anything to do with you not doing your job as a state rep. If you want to repeal the law, repeal it. But after the angry phone calls and text messages that I've gotten, I'm not too sure that there are any other state reps or senators who are willing to actually do that. Karen Whitsett might be the only one who's willing to stand up and do what it takes. It's too bad she's generally in a different ideology than I am. Although she did tell me that I would be surprised, and we're actually probably more alike in ideology than what I'm assuming. So we'll see what that means. Any other questions? Wow, this is so strange. Are you guys sure? I can try to do a song and dance, but that would run very quickly far away from here, because that's not my talent at all.
I got a question. Where do we as citizens stand as far as being forced to wear masks in individual businesses, or being required to take the COVID test before certain medical procedures? Do we have any recourse as far as an individual suit or a class action suit even the employees in these businesses. I feel so sorry for them, and they're suffering with these masks on. I don't understand it.
So I wish that I had a yes or no answer for you. In general, totally unconstitutional. Not, if the basic principle of our government is if the Constitution doesn't give the government a specific right to do something, then they don't have it. What we've been conditioned to think is, well, if the Constitution doesn't give us that particular protection as individuals, then we don't have it. That's backwards. It literally is that if we do not give the government a particular right or power to do something, they don't have the power to do it. So, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about private sector to some degree, although most of the private sector is forcing that based on the executive orders requiring them to do that. And then, then we have the government. Oh, look at that, somebody's calling. How sweet. So that is a bigger issue, though, because the science and data that Gretchen likes to rely on isn't even there for the masks. We have, for example, the oh shoot, Mike's not standing there. Okay, my husband had hey. What about the N95 masks? It's
Locked 0.3 microns or larger. COVID is 0.125.
Yeah, that.
Read OSHA.
So, there's like 4,000 things that say how wearing masks all day long is not appropriate. So even the World Health Organization, the longest time was coming out and saying, do not wear masks all day long. As a general public, don't do it. And then they started to change parts of their website, and so parts will look like, it says, well, actually, maybe you should, and then if you keep reading, then it's like, well, wait, no, it says why you shouldn't. So it's like they did a hack job on their own website to explain about masks. The CDC, of course, started off saying, absolutely not, don't wear masks in public, and then said, yes, you should. So recently, the CDC and the World Health Organization came out saying, well, so they were studying the second waves and things that were starting to come about in other countries, as well as, mostly in other countries. We've seen a little bit like in New York and whatnot, but in the other countries that love their government being involved in every aspect of their lives, they've been doing the contact tracing thing hardcore, which actually has helped to show how people who have COVID-19 and then you're out and you're sick, like when you have the flu, if you got to go to work, you're you got bills to pay, you don't have any other choice, you don't have any vacation pay, you go to work, right? That's the way it's kind of always been. And so if you have COVID-19 and you're out and you have, you're in contact with people, what they're finding is that actually is not what was causing other people to get sick. It's not a transmission, I forget the terminology they were calling it, like a secondary transmission like they were initially expecting in the first place. And so you have the masks that don't even even the N95 masks don't even do what they're supposed to be doing. Certainly the dust masks and the cloth masks, those don't do anything. People are actually getting sick from it. And you have people, I have asthma. I can't breathe very well for a variety of reasons, not just that. So I tried to wear one for 5 minutes in this whole entire time. That's the longest I've ever worn a mask. And I couldn't even do it. I had to hold it away from my face. So I needed to get my daughter's things from a school that I worked at and she went to school at. Needless to say, we're going back to homeschooling. But it's, you have people that have PTSD. You have people that have the woman that was on the news that you might have seen me talk about, back in April when Menards was the very first story that hit the news about Menards discriminating against this woman who had a walker and drove herself and got all the way to Menards. It was a long ways from where she had to park, and she got into the store and she's clearly got an oxygen tank in the whole 9 yards, and she actually needed a fuse for her oxygen machine. That's the only reason why she was at Menards that day. and they denied her service, wouldn't help her, didn't offer to go get it for her, you know, expecting her to maybe order it online. No, this woman does not order things online. She just wanted to breathe. And that should be a right that all of us have, is to be able to breathe. And so, you know, we have Americans with Disabilities Act protections, which talk about if you're going to claim that you have to discriminate against somebody because their disability is basically putting your other customers at risk because it's not safe or whatever, you actually have to have the actual direct causal link. You have to be able to prove it. It can't just be some assumptions or some fears. I don't have the exact language off the top of my head in the Americans with Disabilities Act, but that applies obviously to her. But I would say if we're going to become a society where wearing a mask is the norm, then you better believe not being able to wear a mask is going to be considered a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, because I'm not going to wear one. I'm going to be able to breathe fresh air. And if it's going to have to be considered a disability just to want to be able to breathe fresh air, well, then that's what we're going to do. One way or another. I'm not going to rest until that issue is put down for good. But right now, I don't know what the answer is. Because our system is obviously broken. I can't believe not every single state, but most states across the U.S. have allowed themselves to be put in the situation that we've been put in. I never thought I would have seen the day. So I wish I had the answer. Maybe it's a class action lawsuit. Maybe, but who would it be against? I mean, definitely, I alone have had hundreds of people asking me to sue Menards. And then there's orthodontist's office, and there's, you know, other employers. There's, you know, I had somebody who needed a cardiac. She's a nurse. She works, you know, in the field, having to wear a mask all the time, more than normal because of COVID-19, and was starting to feel lightheaded and had, you know, feeling of like heart palpitations, etc. They, you know, well, it could not be the mask, obviously not. This is good for you. So she had to go get this cardiology workup, and she did the whole like beginning stuff. She went in to do the stress test where she has to be on the treadmill, and the person running the equipment that day told her she had to have a mask on while doing that. And she's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm gonna pass out and hit my head, and like that's not gonna be okay." They basically forced her out, would not treat her, denied her medical care for that. And it wasn't even like a surgery about getting, you know, the COVID testing or anything like that. I mean, it is the most ridiculous things I've ever seen happening. And it's our medical providers that are okay with it. So I don't know what the answer is on that. I'm all ears, but right now, I know this constitutional amendment is our best shot at starting somewhere. So, sorry, I don't have a real good answer for you on that. Any other questions? Yeah. Eternity. How long is Whitmer going to keep going? I don't think she ever intends to stop. I mean, the thing is, the Court of Claims judge, for anybody that might have watched it online, when the Court of Claims judge was presiding over the motion hearing, essentially, with the legislature and the governor's attorneys, she, as the judge, was grilling the governor's attorney on several points. I mean, his whole presentation was basically shot by her, and I thought, well, obviously she's going to rule in our favor. No, she didn't. But one of the points she made was, well, if the governor just seems to think that she can just do this, you know, with the Emergency Powers of Governor Act and not be bound by that 28-day requirement in the other statute, assuming all the rest of it's constitutional in the first place, which it's not, then what would stop her from just renewing it, you know, ending one state of emergency and renewing it, and then continuing to do that for the entire time that she's in office? That's what the judge said. And I was like, ding, 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 ding. And then she said, well, what would stop her then from saying, well, we're going to modify how we do elections, and then, wait a second, that actually happened already. But what would stop her from modifying elections so that she can just maintain her power? That's a real, like, I don't, it's so dumbfounding to me how the judge could recognize that and then still think it's totally fine that she has the right to do that. I don't think she's going to stop ever. I really don't. I think she's just on a power trip high and she's going to keep on going. Why should she stop? I mean, obviously, the coronavirus is so dangerous in Michigan right now that we should be making sure that we're all 6 feet apart because we're all going to die tomorrow. What's that? Yeah. So, anyway. Any other questions? Yeah.
So knowing that she's going to be emergency license, is she find possibly another loophole to either reuse 1945 or find another loophole to extend her powers beyond the 60s? Is that an option for her?
As much as she's continuing to go to this point, she can certainly keep going past the 16th. Yeah, because the Emergency Powers of Governor Act, if we're going to pretend that that's the only law on point, it doesn't have an end date. So if she, just as the way she is, continued to push it out, push it out, push it out, yeah, she'll just keep doing it. I have no doubt. Yeah.
Can she get in trouble for not wearing a mask at the salon?
Well, okay, so there's the mask requirement under, and I'll be honest, I haven't looked at orders, like 108 through 130 very closely, because I just stopped caring enough about it. But the initial ones that required the mask, it clearly said you wear a mask unless, if you're not medically able to do so. And then that was always in paragraph 15. And then paragraph 16 was the exception of, because it was in the stay-at-home order, the paragraph 16 was about, well, there's going to be the, if you are going to church, you're not going to be in trouble, under this order for not being at home kind of thing. And then they would squeeze in a sentence at the end of paragraph 16 that said, and if you're not abiding by the conditions of paragraph 15A, then you're not going to be charged with a misdemeanor. That was her, really interesting way of saying, we're not going to enforce the wearing of masks. You're not going to be charged with anything. Obviously, though, Attorney General Dana Nessel seems to think that licensing consequences can just, come, like with Carl. It's interesting, though, that we saw in the news, I don't know about you, I heard of people who saw it in the news, that it was a 7-0 victory for Carl at the Supreme Court. I honestly don't know where that came from. I was discussing that with somebody because I follow the Supreme Court closely, and I looked at the decision myself, and the decision doesn't say anything on it about who, whether it was 7-0 or 5-2 or anything like that. And the decision itself was actually 4 sentences long, and then there was a concurrence or 2 or whatnot written with it. But the opinion of the court actually didn't say anything that really seemed to give that, like, yes, it's a 7-0, like, this is for freedom. So I really don't know where that came from. I could be missing something, but just something that kind of came to mind that a lot of people have been talking about is this 7-0 win for Carl. And it sent it back down to the Court of Appeals. So his case isn't even over. So the worry is, like with that and not wearing masks, would be not so much having a misdemeanor charge out of violating the executive order per se, as it would be for, what kind of licensing consequences would come out of that, which I don't think even remotely are constitutional at all, but we'll see what the Supreme Court decides to do when they're all said and done, totally deciding Carl's case. Any other questions? You look like you had one. Did you change your mind?
Well, I got so many, I gotta figure out how to ask them, but I did think the Carl situation was done. But the masks are, she said they were law in one of her press conferences. That the mask wearing was a law. But she doesn't
Oh yeah,
know
that's
the law.
multiple Facebook posts of companies, restaurants, bars, that if you do not wear one, it is against the law to not wear one, you will be removed from premises or asked for removal. I've seen it on almost
Say that
every building
again?
in town. Every one of them is saying you have to wear a mask if you're something against the law.
Yeah, I myself encountered that in Petoskey when we were at, so we did a rally in Petoskey on Sunday, and we waited like 45 minutes to be able to sit outside nonetheless, because it was a nice day out, we wanted to eat outside. Anyway, we walked in without masks. We had 2 of our kids with us, and they didn't say anything about it. They just said it would be about 20 minutes, and 45 minutes later, we walked in and said, well, hey, we're ready for our table. And I was on the phone with one of my other children, and so my husband went in, and he came out, and he's all mad, and he's like, we're leaving, and I'm like, no, I'm starving. It's like 8:30, and I haven't eaten a meal today, so we're not leaving. What's going on? They were trying to tell us at that point that we had to wear masks, and we wouldn't be allowed to walk through the restaurant to get to a table. And we haven't eaten out a lot, because there's not many meals I really get to partake in when I'm doing this 24/7, but the ones that we have been to around here haven't given us a problem about it. So I didn't even think about it, and so I went in and I said, yeah, well, I would like to talk to the manager. Is it a policy? Is it, are you doing this because it's the executive order? And, he tried to tell me that it's the law, and when I pulled up, of course I had the executive order right then and there, and I had the paragraph pulled up, and I said, actually, and he's like, oh, I'm just not going to argue with you about it, it's the law, whatever. It was actually, I was harassed very intensely by several employees while I'm just standing there waiting to be seated. So, yeah, it's not a law. Executive orders, the interesting thing is, so the Emergency Management Act of 1976 looks like it does give the governor authority to make executive orders to control the people during a time of emergency, whatever that might look like. But the Constitution doesn't let her do that. The Constitution says that the governor gets to make executive orders that basically serve to reorganize how the executive branch looks. And if she does that, Article 5, Section 2 requires her to produce those to the legislature and give them, I believe it's 60 days, to decide if they're going to essentially veto what she has done with that restructuring or not. And those have nothing to do with ordering us to stay home or wear masks or not have our businesses open or anything like that. So I don't know why. I'm just dumbfounded at why there's not a ton of government officials jumping up and down going, duh, it's not a law. It's not a law. It's an executive order that's being illegally enforced, but it doesn't make it a law. So.
But she's given so many constrictions on these small businesses. If they don't comply, and none of them is wearing masks, requiring their patrons to wear masks, but if they don't have their patrons wear the mask, does the small business get in trouble? Can she come back on them if you don't make your patrons wear masks?
That's what the argument is that, the Attorney General is going to be coming after businesses who are not, requiring people to wear masks and whatnot.
Some do and some don't.
It's not, yeah. To me, I'd rather do the right thing in general, but certainly in the long run, this is not going to be, the businesses that are forcing people to wear masks and then not, refusing service if they don't wear masks, they're going to be held accountable, especially the big ones. If Menards thinks they're going to get away with it, I'm not the only attorney that's going to be willing to take on cases like that. I just can't do it right now because we have this little constitutional amendment we're working on. But they're going to be held accountable. So it's an ugly situation. It's not an easy situation to be in, but I just hope more and more businesses will do the right thing and not force people to do that. Yeah. They don't have a right to take your temperature either. I mean, I know that's part of the orders that have come down from the governor, but they don't have a right to do that. When my husband's work started doing that, he's lucky I didn't go to work with him that day, because they don't have a right to do that either. Now, does that mean you're not going to be fired in the meantime? Or, I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle right now because the insanity level is so high and it permeates so many different government officials and different branches of government. But once we can regain our sanity about us, then absolutely, I would.
Strike them.
But you have to vote for it.
Yeah.
I know I can get a good person. Mayor has been with Whitmore, so I got some remoters.
Probably at this point, the easiest way to do something about that would be to help us get this constitutional amendment passed, because there's a provision specifically in there that addresses that. And also the provision that she's been relying on with Article 4, Section 51, I believe, of our state constitution, that public health part, it doesn't even apply to her. It's supposed to be for the legislature. But there's some language in there that can be cleared up, and so I do that in this constitutional amendment so that this kind of stuff doesn't keep happening and they can't use these kind of arguments in the future when the next round of coronavirus and the next flu season hits us again. But I thought I saw, there you are. Are you ready?
I think he's wanting to take a break.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate all the questions, and